And I'm going to go ahead and read the whole chapter. 2 Samuel chapter 10. I had it written down to go to verse 8, but I'm just going to go ahead and read the entire chapter. And it happened afterwards that the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun, his son, became king in his place. And David said, I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, just as his father showed kindness to me. So David sent some of his servants to console him concerning his father. But when David's servants came to the land of the Ammonites, the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanun, their lord, do you think that David is honoring your father because he has sent consolers to you? Has David not sent his servants to you in order to search the city, to spy it out and overthrow it? So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half of their beards. And he cut off their garments in the middle as far as their hips and sent them away. When this was told to David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly humiliated. And the king said, stay at Jericho until your beards grow, and then return. Now, when the sons of Ammon saw that they had become odious to David, the sons of Ammon sent and hired the Arameans of Beth Rahab and the Arameans of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and the men of Tov with 12,000 men. When David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the army, the mighty men. The sons of Ammon came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the city, while the Arameans of Zobah and of Rehob and the men of Tov and Maacah were by themselves in the field. Now, when Joab saw that the battle was set against him in front and in the rear, he selected from all the choice men of Israel and arrayed them against the Arameans. But the remainder of the men he placed in the hand of Abishai, his brother, and he arrayed them against the sons of Ammon. He said, if the Arameans are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the sons of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will come to help you. Be strong and let us show ourselves courageous for the sake of our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight. So Joab and the people who were with him drew near to the battle against the Arameans, and they fled before him. When the sons of Ammon saw that the Arameans fled, they also fled before Abishai and entered the city. Then Joab returned from fighting against the sons of Ammon and came to Jerusalem. When the Arameans saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together. And Hadadezer sent and brought out the Arameans who were beyond the river. And they came to Helam and to Shobach. The commander of the army of Hadadezer led them. Now, when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan and came to Helam. And the Arameans arrayed themselves to meet David and fought against him. But the Arameans fled before Israel. And David killed 700 charioteers of the Arameans and 40,000 horsemen and struck down Shobach, the commander of their army, and he died there. When all the kings, servants of Hadadezer, saw that they were defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Arameans feared to help the sons of Ammon anymore. The word of the Lord. Now we've been studying David. Really, David is. He's always been my hero since I was a pretty young guy. David is a great guy to study. We've seen him kill the lion and the bear. We've seen him take out a sling and put a stone in it and kill a giant 10 foot tall named Goliath. He's basically a person before whom the Philistines and other nations cringe before him. There's a book out there written, I can't remember who wrote it. I can't remember the name, but he's called Man of War, Man of Prayer. David's man of war. He's a scary man of war. He's also a man of prayer, man of peace, man of kindness. And early on, we see him under the stars, playing his harp, singing songs to God. We see that later on, he won't touch King Saul. Later on, he wants to build a temple for God. And God tells him his son will build that temple. And then in the past message we saw last week, David is a man of kindness. And he wants to show kindness to someone in Saul's house for the sake of Jonathan, who had loved him like a brother. He wants to show God's kindness, same kind of kindness that Jonathan had shown him. And so we come to chapter 10. Did you notice what it says there? that David wanted to show Nahash, his son, Hanun, kindness for his father's sake. You see, it's just what the king does. The king shows kindness to Mephibosheth, and the king shows kindness to those outside Israel as well. It's just what the king does. So in chapter 9, remember, he's looking for someone among Saul's house to show kindness. And they go searching for a person, and they finally come to one, and his name is Mephibosheth. And remember how David protected him from death. David provided for him. Remember, he gave him all of his grandfathers, if you will, land and people to take care of it and farm it. And he gave him a position at the table. And so as we come to chapter 10, we see Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, he has died. And King David wants to show his son a kindness. He shows him this kindness because David is not just kind to his own people, but he's kind to all people. And that'll set the tone for the sermon. Why in the world, here's a good question for us. Why in the world would the king show kindness to Hanun, the Ammonite? Do you remember who his father was? Do you remember Nahash, the eye-gouging Ammonite? I love to say that. Nahash, the Ammonite who would make peace with Jabesh Gilead, God's people, just if they would allow him to scoop out their right eyes. That's how one commentator put it. He wants to scoop out right eyes. He'll make peace if you'll let him have your right eye. Now, what does that mean? Maybe that means we need to have a little explanation. Think about, guys, if you are fighting in a battle and you're right-handed and you have your shield on your left arm and you have your shield up and that keeps you covered here and you're using your right eye for your sword. If you have no right eye, you have to lower your shield and you are exposed in a way that you would never be exposed if you had your right eye. Well, this is what this man wants. I'll make peace with you. Sure, I'll make peace with you. Just let me have your right eyes. Well, when Saul found out about this, he came out from behind the plow. The Spirit of God empowered him. He went and crushed Nahash, and not even two of Nahash's men were left standing together, we're told at the end of that battle. So Nahash is not really a likely candidate for King David's kindness. But most likely what we understand is that Nahash became a vassal for King Saul, under King Saul. So commentators believe that once Saul declared David to be his enemy, that Nahash did a kindness for David. We're told that he did something kind for David. There in verse 2, he said, just as his father showed a kindness to me. We don't know what that kindness was. But the idea probably was David is running from Saul and Nahash, in order to basically stick it in Nahash's eye. In King Saul's eye, he probably supported David while he was fleeing from Saul and all his jealousy. So David is going to show a kindness to Hanun, and he sends a delegation of men to him, to his nobles, to express sympathy for his father, the loss of his father. Many times we see this happen on TV. We hear about somebody dying, and a president of the United States maybe goes over to another country at a time of a funeral to show them a kindness. And what it basically is to say is that, listen, you don't have to worry about me. Our relationship is still the same, even though your father died or even though the king has died. Our relationship with your country is intact. And so David wants to alleviate Hanun of any fears. He wants to assure him of his kindness, that the relationship remains the same. It's just what the king does. And it's also just what King Jesus does. King Jesus not only preaches the gospel to his own people, he not only preaches the gospel to the Mephibosheths, but he preaches the gospel to the Hanuns of the world. In Matthew 28:19, we all know this, therefore go and make disciples of all the nations. In Acts 1:8, Jesus tells his disciples, but you, after you receive power, when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, that you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, but also Judea, and then also Samaria, the next circle out, and then also the next circle out is to the remotest parts of the earth. Now, in John chapter 1, verses 10 and 11, that's the part of the prologue of John. John 1 through 18 is the prologue, and basically a prologue tells you what's coming. So in John 1, 10, and 11, we see that Jesus, he's kind of giving us what's going to be taught through the book of John. And he alerts us to the fact that the world that he made doesn't recognize him. The people, the Jews that are his people, don't receive him. And so the idea here is that it seems like when you move through the prologue, you're going to be reading a book about people who don't receive him at all. And then you get to verse 12 and it says this, yet to all who received Jesus, to those who believe in his name, have the right to become the children of God, those children born of God. So at first it seems like nobody's going to receive kindness, and then you find out that people do receive God's kindness through the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, I want you to listen to this. Those who received him, they become adopted members of the family of God. In our confession, we have one short paragraph about adoption. And what I've done is I want to read it to you, but I put it in second person and I've taken it out of third person. And I want you to read, I used to have this memorized, but I don't have it memorized. I don't have that still trap mind anymore, but let me read it to you in the second person. You have become a part of the family of God through faith in Jesus Christ alone. You, not they, you are received into the number. You enjoy the privileges of the children of God. You have his name placed upon you. You have access to the throne of grace. You have the spirit of adoption, which enables you to cry, Abba, Father. Your Father pities you. Your Father protects you. Your Father provides for you, and he chastens you as a father, yet he never casts you off. Your Father seals you for the day of redemption. You inherit the promises of God, and you are an heir of eternal life. It's just what the King does. Those are some, I would go read that if I were you and I felt discouraged. I would go read that, put it in second person singular, and read it to yourself. This is what your Father does for you. It's just how God is, especially in the person of his Son, Jesus Christ. Has the King's kindness come to you? Are you part of this called out group of people? Are you part of that number? Well, we see that's what the King does, but it's also what the King's disciples do. Now, I could tell you to turn to Galatians 6:10, but I'll just read it to you and listen. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who are of the household of the faith. I said this to you this morning, this verse. And so you and I, as the people of God, we are especially to do good to those who are of the household of the faith. We are to take every opportunity to fortify and strengthen our relationships with the people in this church, and we are to steer away from anything that would cause alienation and division. Jesus Christ is the vine, and you and I, we are to be branches in the vine. Think about what that means. He's the vine, and you and I are connected to the same vine, and we're side by side. And you and I, we are to show love to each other. The Apostle Paul writes that God has taught us this love. And this love, according to 1 Thessalonians 3:12 and 4:9, is to increase. It's to increase more and more as we seek to love each other. 1 Peter 4:8, he says this, above all, love one another deeply or fervently. If you read Thomas Watson's works, and you sometimes, I don't know if they do this on purpose. I don't know if he did this or if somebody's trying to help. But every time the word fervent is there in his text, it's got a little parentheses there, and it says boiling. Fervent means boiling. Fervent means hot. Keep this love hot. Keep this love warm. If it starts to go out, throw some more kindling on the fire. Keep the love warm. Keep the love hot between you and yourself. You and your loved ones, and you and the family of God. And then he speaks there about letting your love cover a multitude of sins. So we have to be ready to forgive petty things sometimes. One time one of the elders says, what would you do if you saw me being unkind to my wife? I said, I'd just walk on by. He said, well, you wouldn't come in and correct me? I said, well, if I saw you do it 30 times in a row, I might come and talk to you. But if you do it once, man, that's you get that figured out with her. right? We let love cover a multitude of sins. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5:22 through 23, do you know what the first fruit is? Love. And then you go through all the list. What's the last one? Self-control. Love and self-control. In order to love, I need self-control. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, that's one of my favorite verses. I needed to remind myself of this. Maybe you need to be reminded of this. God, Timothy, has not given you a spirit of timidity, but he's given you a spirit of power so that you might have love and self-control. A spirit of love, a spirit of power and love and self-control. So we have the power to love other people, and we have the power to do it under control. I love that. I love to see these connections. You and I have the power to be people who strengthen our relationships with each other. And we have the power to be under control as we do it so that we do not steer away from love and steer away from those things we can steer away from those things that would cause division and alienation. And so these are the things we have the power to do. So you and I, if we have the Spirit of God, we have no excuse not to show love to each other. And if we don't show this love to each other, we have to at least ask ourselves the question, do I have the Spirit? Because you see, the Spirit is a spirit of power and love and discipline. And the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace all the way to self-discipline. Do I have the Spirit, and am I able to do good, especially to those who are of the household of the faith? Well, also going back to that verse, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to who? All men. Not just especially to the house of the faith, but to all men. So we're to do good to everyone. And we were kind of talking about this yesterday among the men. Sometimes I think that and I've had to sit down and tell people this many times. I think, like, for instance, I'll go out here to knock on doors and somebody goes, oh, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Well, why not? Well, I don't want to go out there and have to share the gospel. And I'm going, well, see, back in the 60s and 70s, going out and knocking on doors sort of meant sharing a planned gospel presentation. Well, we're not in that day right now, folks. We're in the day of knocking on the door and just saying, can we talk? We have a church. We're trying to invite people to it. We're trying to get a conversation going. Now, it's great to have a plan to share the gospel. It's great to have one memorized plan. It's better to have 5 memorized plans. It's better just to have it oozing out of you. It's better to be able to just talk about Jesus with your friends. But one thing is absolutely necessary, and it's this, that you and I be real Christians with the people we're around. It's not absolutely necessary that we have a track, that we have something memorized, and we do this. It's great if you do. But what's absolutely necessary is for you and I to be real Christians to those with whom we have to do. Let me tell you how it goes. So you eat and your friends eat. You eat and your mom and dad eat. You eat and those who do not know Jesus, they also eat. You work and they work. They have a family. You have a family. You have a death in your family and they come and they bring you something to eat to give you some comfort, help you out. Then they have a death in their family and you go and they bring you. You go and bring them something to eat. You know, I had a lady that was an atheist, and she brought us 8 meals when we had our fourth baby. When Selah was born, she brought us 8 meals. Some of the best food. Oh, but all of this to say, we're doing the same things with all these people, all those people around, our neighbors, those at work, wherever you might, be doing things, and all of a sudden things start to happen. People come to you and they say, well, why don't you talk this way? Or why do you talk like that? Or why don't you say these words? There's a guy on TV. I've been telling our men about a guy on TV, as a comedian. He will not curse and he will not do unkind things to people in his show. Why do you do that? Don't you think? Why do you not talk like the rest of us? And so these people begin to ask you questions. You can either share the gospel or you can say, I'm not really good at that. I have a friend who literally says, I don't do that really, really well, sharing the gospel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring him to talk to you. Okay. But that's what we need to do. And the apostle teaches us to be at peace with all men. And he teaches us to do good to all men. Look for opportunities. Bring them to the pastor if you need to. I had a friend who was a trainer in the gym. He was We called him Big Mike. And he graduated from Duke University, played Division I football. He was a giant. He loved human performance and enhancement. And he also had a strange job in the evening. He worked at a gentleman's club. He used to come and speak to me in the training room. And he would say, "What are you preaching on tonight?" And we would talk about it. And he told me one night, I remember we had this fabulous conversation. We didn't have a conversation about what went on in the gentleman's club. We had a conversation about the Secret Service men who came and he talked to at the gentleman's club. And what he told me about how Secret Service agents move through and get ready for the president to come along. But, you know, this man, he always says, "What are you preaching on?" And I always had an opening to say something about Christ. I don't know what comes of that. I just know that these are the things we do good to all men. Well, second, we see the king's kindness extended. Let's look at the king's kindness being rejected. It's just what nations do. So the king sends his delegation to Hanan to express his sympathy and his condolences about his father's death. It's a really nice gesture. We might call it a sweet, nice touch. And what did he do? What did Hanan do? He committed a great folly. He listened to the advice of his nobles. Verse 3, "Do you think that David is honoring your father because he has sent consolers to you? Has David not sent his servants to you in order to search the city and spy it out and overthrow it?" And so he listens to the advice of his noblemen. He doesn't receive David's kindness the way he ought to. He received it with suspicion. And this is what he did to the men. He seized the men. He shaved off their beards halfway on one side. He cut off their garments up to the middle of their thighs, which means they were exposed. And then he ran them out of town. Then he humiliated them. And that's just what politicians do. So even though Nahash had been under control for a while, remember Nahash is doing a kindness for David. Didn't take long for these Ammonites, as one commentator said, to get back to their fiendish ways. Remember, Nahash scooped out right eyes. And later on in the scriptures, we find out that the Ammonites slice open pregnant women in order to kill 2 generations at one time. And so this is what we should expect from these Ammonites: shaving beards off, hacking off garments, and humiliating men in the front of a town. It's just what Ammonites do. Now let's think about these Arameans. You saw the Arameans. You know the Arameans, they're mercenaries. They're getting paid. They're going to fight for the Ammonites. These Ammonites realize that they've made David angry. And so David is going to come against them. They're severely undermanned. So what they do is they go out in 1 Chronicles 19, the parallel passage, it says that they paid 1,000 talents of silver for the help of these Arameans. Now, you know how many pounds of silver 1,000 talents is? According to my math, 68,000 pounds of silver. That's what these men are being paid. These guys are in it for the money. 43,000 soldiers are in it for the money. Now, see, the Ammonites are under David's paying tribute, but also these Arameans are also paying tribute to David as well. And it didn't take long for them to want to rebel and get out from underneath David, just like the Ammonites. And so when David hears about these nations conspiring together and preparing to go to war, David sends his general out, Joab. And Joab, man, he's going to have all kinds of problems in the future. But right now he goes out and fights with his brother, and they have a great victory over the Arameans. And the Ammonites, did you hear what it said there? The Ammonites, when they saw the Arameans being defeated, they just walked back in the walls of their city and closed the doors. They're going to fight against David another day, but the Arameans are being defeated. And so the Ammonites go back behind their walls, and then David, he defeats them, and then the Arameans, they regrouped. Under Hadadezer at the end there, that text we read, David sent his men back out and defeated them one last time. Verse 19 says, when all the kings, the servants of Hadadezer, saw that they were defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Arameans feared to help the sons of Ammon any more. Well, let's make some applications and we'll come to the Lord's Supper. It's just what worldly nations do. They reject King Jesus' kindness. Think about David sending out this group of people to be kind, and he's rejected. And the same thing happens to King Jesus. In Psalm chapter 2, we read that all the nations are raging against King David, and we can extrapolate that to King Jesus because he's David's greater son. And the nations will not subject themselves to Jesus. They're going to stand up against Jesus Christ. They're going to cast off his laws, cast off his rules and ways. Just as David came against these two nations, King Jesus will also come against all the nations that conspire against him, and he will destroy them unless they, as Psalm 2 says, wise up and make peace. In the New Testament, we see many people conspiring against Jesus. If we stopped, we could say, who do you think of conspiring against Jesus? We could start with Herod the Great, couldn't we? And then we could go and talk about the Jewish elite. We could talk about the people of the Jews. We could talk about Herod Antipas. We could talk about Pontius Pilate. We could talk about the Gentiles all conspiring against Jesus. You could talk about Pilate going, remember, hey, listen, these disciples are going to make sure that Jesus looks like he's been raised from the dead. And so Pilate goes and says, make the tomb as secure as you can. Jesus still rose from the dead. Jesus rose from the dead, ascended to the right hand of God, and he rules there right now. And today, in spite of all worldly nations and worldly politicians who continue to conspire against King Jesus, who continue to do all they can to set aside his rules and his ways, Jesus still rules. And unless nations wise up and kiss Jesus, unless nations take refuge in Jesus, you can read it in Revelation 19. This is what happens. King Jesus will come riding on a white horse, and when he comes to, in the end, to judge, and he will make war on the nations. Verse 15, Revelation 19. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that with it he may strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierce wrath of God the Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Well, this is what the nations do. It's also what individual sinners do. They reject Jesus' kindness. Think about Hanun. He looked with suspicion on David's kindness because of those guys that advised him. And this is what individual sinners do many times. The promise of protection from the wrath of God, the provision guaranteeing them life today and in the future, and a privileged position to eat and drink at the table, and it's interpreted with suspicion. When you hear of the king's kindness, are you suspicious of his motives? Is our first thought many times, and you know, when people are there, some people you should be suspicious of some people, but Jesus we ought not to be suspicious of. What does Jesus want out of this? Why would Jesus want me to be his disciple? Why would Jesus want me to submit and kiss his feet? Why should there be peace between me and Jesus? Isn't he just wanting power? Isn't that church just wanting to have position and profit? Bishop Patrick writes this, there is nothing so well meant, but it may be ill interpreted and is wont to be so by men who love nobody but themselves. You see, if you love nobody but yourselves, you have suspicions about everybody else. If you know yourself and you believe, you know that if you believe it's all about me and you think that everybody else thinks it's all about me, then you suspect everybody of their heart. Because I have sinful motives and everyone else around me has sinful motives. And I can't believe anyone would do me good. I can't believe anyone would really be gracious and kind to me. There's always an ulterior motive. And so individual sinners will reject Jesus. They'll criticize Jesus, the only person who had no wicked motive at all. Jesus, in fact, is the only one who put aside all selfish motives and in humility considered individual sinners as better than himself. He extended his kindness without any ulterior motive. He goes to the cross to glorify God the Father, and he goes to the cross to do good for individual sinners. Those are his motives. What are we doing with Jesus' kindness? Am I rejecting Jesus' kindness? Am I interpreting it the wrong way with suspicion? Think about Christ. Look at him in the text of the Bible. Don't listen to me. Just act like I don't exist. Go read the Bible, look at Jesus and see if he's not, and I like the words of John Flavel, go look at him and see if he's not the kindness of God wrapped up in skin. Because he is. No ulterior motives. Well, think about our flesh for a second before we move to the Lord's Supper. It's just what Christians' flesh does. Think about these Ammonites and Arameans. They're vassals to David. They're paying tribute to David. But when they find out, we find out how happy they are about paying tribute, right? They don't like to pay tribute to David. And so they charge David with wicked motives, and they go to war against David because it's their nature to rebel against David. And the same thing is true about our flesh. You and I, we have King Jesus ruling over us if we're Christians. Jesus rules and reigns over us, but the flesh remains in us. And this flesh in us is just like the Ammonites and Arameans. They rebel against their king, and our flesh rebels against the spirit that's now working in us. Galatians 5:17 says, the flesh lusts against the spirit lusts against the flesh. So that means that basically there's a big, all of us know, right? A war is going on inside of me. There's this opposition when I would choose to do the right. There's an opposition inside of me that is pulling at me not to. And our flesh would love to sow the sin of discord, fits of rage, division, self-interest, and indulging the suspicion of others. So easy to look at a brother and think, instead of think the right thoughts, hey, to be suspicious of a brother. So what should I do? Well, think about what David did. What did he do when he found out the Ammonites and the Arameans were preparing for war? Well, he didn't sit around and wait for them to come to him. He went straight to them. And that's what we have to do. I would recommend this if you could get it. John Owen wrote a book, and basically the verse that the book is written on is Romans 8:15, the mortification of sin. And the whole book is basically this verse, that you and I, by the Spirit, are to put to death the deeds of the flesh. That's what the whole book's about. You and I, we are to put to death the deeds of the flesh by the power of God's Spirit. We're back to that power again. We're back to 2 Timothy 1:7 again. We have a spirit of power, not of fear. And you and I, by the power of the Spirit, we are to put to death suspicion and hatred and harsh judgments of others. Cut them off. When our flesh would respond with hatred and unkindness, when we've been kind, we have to keep being kind. And if you need help being kind, what do we need to do? Well, we might need to be encouraged by our friends, and we might need to be down on our knees asking God to help us. You know, nobody knows who I'm talking about. So 34 years ago, there was a man who came at me and came at my wife. And I used to go up into my third floor of our house, and I'd just lay out on the floor and read the Psalms and pray and say, Lord, if I don't win it here, I'm going to lose it when I'm with him. And then he hurt himself. He hurt his arm. And I went and I bought him a book, and I went over and I spent time with him, crushing any kind of hatred that could be there. Doing these things, it's just what the king's disciples do. They put to death the deeds of the flesh. Well, one of the things that the king continues to do in our presence tonight is set a table for us. And he continues to set this table before us because we need nourishment on the journey. And so the king calls us tonight to this table. He instituted it the night he was betrayed, and he wants us to remember what he did. He wants us to remember his kindness. He wants us to renew our covenant commitment to him. And he wants us to commune deeply. Jesus said, "This is my body, which is for you, and this is my blood, which is for you." And so for all of Jesus' disciples, he asked for you to come and sit down and eat and drink. Have you professed your faith in Jesus Christ? Have you been baptized, and are you a member of this church or one like it? Are you being taken care of by a session of elders watching over your souls? Then come to this table. If you don't know what we're doing, I think most of you guys know what we're doing. But if you haven't made a profession of faith, I'm going to ask you to refrain from taking the bread and the wine tonight, but I'm going to ask you to participate in another way. I want you to think about the King's kindness. The King's kindness that seeks out and finds people to protect them from God's wrath, to provide for them what they need in this life and the next life, and to give them a place to sit at this table. I want you to think about one day, as Matthew Henry used to say, do business with Jesus at this table. That's the next thing that you need to do as we prepare in the future. I want you guys, if you haven't been eating this meal with Jesus, I want you to think about doing it in the future. Finally, the apostle of Christ, Jesus, he requires that we examine our hearts. Sometimes we talk about examining our hearts. I think one of the things that we need to realize is, as we think about eating in a worthy manner, we have to realize we're not worthy. Eating and drinking in a worthy manner is to recognize I'm unworthy. And if you recognize you're unworthy and you cling to the worthiness of Jesus Christ, his worthiness makes you worthy. His righteousness makes you ready to eat and drink from this table. So here we are, folks. Got a few people here, guys. But you know what we can do? We can cling to the righteousness of Jesus. And we can eat and drink. Our hearts will be nourished. Our hearts will be encouraged. So let's eat and drink to the glory of God tonight together. Let's pray.